I'm Marcus Evans, I'm 28 years old, and on my birthday, my own father sold my car out from under me and then demanded I hand over nearly $7,000 for my brother's college fund. Before I tell you about the family meeting that ended with my grandmother threatening to write my father out of her will and expose a secret he'd kept for decades, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can reach. It started on a Tuesday, my 28th birthday. The day began not with celebration, but with the shrill, insistent beep of a server alarm from my laptop at 6 a.m. I'd been working remotely for a week, helping a mid-size accounting firm migrate their entire database. The project was a nightmare of legacy code and uncooperative hardware. So, my birthday morning was spent on a three-way call with a panicked project manager and a technician in another state, talking them through a system reboot sequence. That's been my life. I'm the guy who fixes things, the problem solver. It's a role I'm good at, one that provides a sense of order that my own family life has always spectacularly lacked. By 5:30 p.m., the crisis was averted. I was mentally fried, staring at lines of code, my eyes burning. I should have been out with friends, maybe at that steakhouse downtown I'd been wanting to try. Instead, I was debating whether to just order a pizza and call it a night. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from my dad. I almost smiled, figuring it was the obligatory happy birthday. When are you coming home for the slightly stale cake? Message. I was so naive. The first message wasn't text. It was a picture. My car. A gleaming black 2018 Honda Accord that I had poured 3 years of savings and double shifts into paying off, was parked in a driveway I didn't recognize. There was a ridiculously large red bow on the hood, the kind you see in car commercials. For a split second, my brain tried to make sense of it. Did they move my car as a prank? Then I saw the caption underneath, sent from my dad. Dad, sold. Got a great price for it. I blinked. I read it again. The words swam on the screen, nonsensical. My heart, which had been plodding along at an exhausted pace all day, suddenly kicked into overdrive, hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My fingers felt clumsy and numb as I tried to type a reply. Me. What is this? This has to be a joke, right? The three little gray dots, the modern symbol of conversational purgatory, appeared and disappeared. Felt like an hour passed in those few seconds. Then the next text bubble popped up. It was not an explanation. It was a list of demands. Dad, don't be dramatic. It's just a car. Family comes first. We let you live here rent-free, you should be grateful. Speaking of family, your brother Jason's college tuition is due Friday. He needs $6,800. The money from the car will cover some of it, but you need to handle the rest. Transfer it to my account by tomorrow. I read the message once, then a second time. A cold, metallic taste filled my mouth. It was the taste of betrayal. The phrase "family comes first" echoed in my head, a hollow, mocking slogan. The rent-free arrangement was his favorite tool of leverage, the thing he held over my head to justify any request, no matter how unreasonable. But this was different. This wasn't a request. This was a robbery packaged as a family obligation. I took a deep breath, trying to force oxygen into my lungs, but the air in my home office felt thick and suffocating. This was the moment, the culmination of 1,000 smaller cuts, 1,000 moments of being overlooked, undervalued, and used. This was the point where the path forks. My hands were shaking, but my mind was suddenly terrifyingly clear. I typed out my response, one single word that felt like a declaration of war. Me, no. His reply was instantaneous, a digital sneer. Dad, what do you mean, no? This isn't a negotiation. It's your family duty. Me, I mean no. Not happening. Not my problem. The final message landed like a guillotine, severing the last thread of hope I ever had for him. Dad, then pack your bags. If you're not part of this family, you're nothing to me. You're dead to me. And just like that, the chain that had bound me to that house, to that role, to that life didn't just break. It vaporized. The walk home was just over 2 miles. I could have called Ethan for a ride, or gotten an Uber, but my body needed to move. I needed the jarring impact of my feet on the concrete sidewalk to keep the rage from consuming me whole. The night air was cool, but I was burning up from the inside out. With every step, the ghosts of birthdays past rose up to meet me, each one a testament to the role I had been cast in since I was old enough to understand what was expected of me. My 21st birthday was supposed to be legendary. A trip to Las Vegas with my 3 best friends from college. We'd planned it for 6 months. Flights booked, hotel reserved, a list of all the things we were going to do that were probably a terrible idea. I had my bag packed and sitting by the door, buzzing with the kind of pure, unadulterated excitement you only feel at that age. I was an hour away from leaving for the airport when my phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice was thin, stretched taut with anxiety. "Marcus, honey," she began, using that tone she always used when she was about to ask for the impossible. "I'm so sorry to do this to you today, but the website for your father's business is down. Completely crashed. He can't see any of his new orders for the weekend, and well, you know how he gets." I knew exactly how he gets. I could picture it perfectly. Him, pacing the worn carpet of the living room, his face growing redder by the second, his voice getting louder as he blamed the cheap laptop he refused to replace, the internet provider, the phase of the moon. Anyone but himself. "Mom, my flight leaves in 3 hours. I pleaded, my own voice sounding small and childish. "I know, sweetie. I know. But he's threatening to call the web hosting company and yell at them. You know, last time he did that, they almost canceled his account. It's his whole livelihood, Marcus. Just for a couple of hours? Just to get it back online. Couple of hours. It was never a couple of hours." I looked at my packed bag. I thought of my friends waiting for me. And then I thought of the screaming match that would engulf the house if I said no, the weeks of simmering resentment that would follow. So I did what I always did. I folded. "Okay," I sighed. "I'll look at it." I unpacked my bag. I spent the next 48 hours, my entire 21st birthday weekend, not in Las Vegas, but in my dimly lit bedroom, fueled by coffee and the bitter taste of disappointment. I didn't just get the site back online. I rebuilt his entire shoddy e-commerce platform from the ground up, fixing security holes that had been there for years. When I finally emerged, bleary-eyed and exhausted, my father was watching a football game. He didn't even turn around. "Is it done?" he asked, his eyes glued to the screen. "Yeah, Dad, it's done. It's more secure now, too." "About time," he grunted. "Should have done this years ago. You see that play? Terrible call by the ref. There was no thank you. No acknowledgement of the canceled trip, the sacrificed weekend. My brother, Jason, then a high school senior, breezed past me, smelling like chlorine and cheap beer. "Whoa, you look like a zombie," he laughed. "I just got back from the pool party at Sarah's. It was epic." He grabbed a soda from the fridge and disappeared upstairs, leaving me standing there feeling like a ghost in my own home. My friends went to Vegas without me. They sent me pictures. It looked like they had a great time. Then there was the staircase incident. Jason, at the peak of his 16-year-old invincibility, decided it would be a brilliant idea to try and grind the main banister on his skateboard. He didn't just fall. He overshot the landing and slammed directly into the drywall, creating a crater the size of a Thanksgiving turkey. My mother shrieked. My father came running. His first reaction wasn't anger at Jason for doing something so monumentally stupid. It was sheer annoyance at the inconvenience. He looked at Jason, who was nursing a bruised elbow. Then he looked at me. I had just gotten my first real promotion at work, and I'd made the mistake of mentioning the salary bump at dinner. "Well," my dad said, gesturing at the hole with a sweep of his arm, "you're the one with the big fancy job now. You can figure out how to get this fixed. Call a guy. Your brother's just a kid. Kids make mistakes." Jason got a half-hearted lecture about being more careful. I got a bill from a drywall contractor for $850. I remember standing in the hallway, looking at the invoice in my hand, and then at the perfect, seamless patch on the wall. It was like the mistake had never happened. It had been erased, and I was the one who paid for the eraser. I paid it without a word. That was my job. I was the family fixer, the designated grown-up, even when I was barely a kid myself. The memories kept coming, a relentless assault. There was the time my grandmother, Eleanor, needed an emergency root canal. My dad claimed he was a little short on cash that month. He put on a great performance, full of sighs and worried looks. So I stepped in, using the money I had been saving for a down payment on a car to cover her dental bill. A little over $2,000. A week later, my father came home, whistling, and unloaded a brand new set of Callaway golf clubs from the trunk of his car. When I confronted him, he just shrugged. What? It was a great deal. Can't pass up a deal like that. Endless weekends were consumed by his needs. Setting up a new smart TV because the remote looked too damn complicated. Driving across town to a specialty store because he needed a specific type of wood stain for a project and didn't want to order it online. Troubleshooting his phone because he downloaded some malware-infested, free poker app. All while Jason was lauded for making the honor roll. An achievement made possible by the high-speed internet I paid for and the quiet house I maintained by absorbing all of our father's chaos. My rent-free living arrangement was a lie. It was a contract written in invisible ink. The terms were that I would be the family's on-call IT specialist, financial advisor, handyman, and emotional shock absorber. In exchange, I would be granted the privilege of living in a house where I was treated like a service provider. As I finally turned onto my own street, the endless reel of memories slowed. The white-hot rage began to cool, hardening into a diamond-sharp resolve. My father's text wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a business decision. He had weighed the value of my car against the cost of his golden child's tuition and found me lacking. Family comes first was just the marketing slogan for his tyranny. I stopped under a flickering streetlight. The world seemed to go quiet. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one number that had never let me down. Ethan, I said, my voice raspy. Dude, happy birthday. I was literally just about to text you. Are we still on for beers this weekend to celebrate? His voice was so normal, so cheerful. It felt like it was from another universe. Change of plans, I said, the words tasting like ash. I think I'm homeless. The cheerful energy on the other end of the line vanished. What? What are you talking about? He sold my car, Ethan, I said, the words spilling out now, a torrent of disbelief. He sold my car to pay for Jason's college. And then he kicked me out when I said I wouldn't give him the rest of the money. There was a string of curses on the other end that was both creative and deeply satisfying. Then Ethan's voice turned serious. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm on the corner of my street. Walking home. Okay, stop. Right there. Don't go in alone, he commanded. I'm 10 minutes away. I'll be there. We go in, we get your essentials, and you're coming back to my place. Do not get into a screaming match with him. No, I said, and the word had a new weight to it, a new power. I need to do this part myself. But can I call you when it's over? Just in case. You call me the second you're out, Ethan said firmly. Or you call me if you need me to come in. I don't care what time it is. I'll be there. Thanks, man, I said, a lump forming in my throat. I mean it. I hung up and started walking again. The house stood at the end of the block, every window glowing. It looked warm, inviting, perfect picture of suburban peace. It was all a lie. It wasn't a home. It was just a house. And it wasn't my house anymore. Pushing open the front door felt like breaking the surface of stagnant water. The air inside was thick, heavy with unspoken words and resentment. The first thing I noticed was the noise. The TV in the living room was blasting a cable news panel. The angry, overlapping voices, a deliberate wall of sound designed to make conversation impossible. My father was slouched in his favorite worn recliner, a beer sweating on the end table beside him. He didn't turn his head. He didn't acknowledge my existence in any way. I was a ghost in the house I grew up in. My mother stood at the kitchen sink, her back to me, her shoulders hunched. She was scrubbing a pot with a furious, circular motion, as if she could scour away the tension in the room. She was the queen of passive aggression. the master of communicating her displeasure through pointed silence and frantic, unnecessary chores. "Marcus," she said without turning around. Her voice was brittle. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge if you're hungry." It was so absurd, so profoundly disconnected from the reality of the situation, that I almost laughed. My life had just been detonated, and she was offering me lasagna. "I'm not hungry, Mom," I said, my voice steady and low, but loud enough to cut through the noise of the TV. I dropped my work bag by the door. "I'm here to pack my things." That got her attention. She turned around slowly, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she wouldn't quite meet my gaze. "Don't be like this," she whispered, as if the walls themselves might be offended. "Your father is just... he's under a lot of pressure. Jason's tuition. The business has been slow. The business is slow because he refuses to update his methods," I countered, looking past her, directly at the back of my father's head. "And my car has nothing to do with Jason's tuition. That was a choice he made." "It was for the family," she insisted, her voice gaining a pleading edge. "Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the good of the family." "I've made sacrifices," I said, a dangerous tremor entering my voice. "I have been making sacrifices my entire life. My 21st birthday, the hole in the wall, Grandma's dental bills. Where does it end? When do my needs ever get considered?" Finally, my father stirred. He used the remote to mute the TV, and the sudden silence was somehow more deafening than the noise. He swiveled his recliner around to face me, his expression a mixture of contempt and annoyance. "It ends when you stop being a selfish, ungrateful child," he said, his voice a low growl. "You live in my house under my roof. The money you make, the car you drive, it's all possible because of the foundation we gave you. It's our investment, and sometimes the investment has to pay a dividend. Your brother is going to college. That is not negotiable. You will help him." The businesslike coldness of his words, the sheer transactional nature of his view of me, snuffed out the last ember of hope I had. He would never see me as a son. I was an asset, and my value had just been liquidated. "No," I said, locking eyes with him. "I'm done being your investment. I'm cashing out." I turned my back on them both and headed for the stairs. It was the most powerful thing I'd ever done in that house. My room was exactly as I'd left it, but it felt alien to me now. A time capsule of a person I no longer was. I grabbed the 2 large duffel bags I owned and started, with a grim, methodical purpose, to empty my life into them. Clothes, books, toiletries. I worked on autopilot, my mind a cold, clear void. "Don't think. Just pack." Downstairs, my father's voice erupted. He was on the phone, no doubt starting his PR campaign to get the family on his side. I could hear his muffled words through the floorboards. "Unbelievable arrogance. After everything we've done. Throws it all back in our face. Selfish." He was building his narrative, brick by brick, painting me as the villain in a story where he was the long-suffering hero. It was a classic move. I zipped up the first bag, my knuckles brushing against the cheap laminate of my desk. My laptop was there, along with the tangle of chargers and drives that constituted my digital life. As I started unplugging things, my eyes landed on a small, black external hard drive tucked behind the monitor. It was an old 500-gigabyte drive I'd set up for my dad years ago to back up his business files, invoices, designs, client lists. He'd found it too confusing, so it had become my responsibility to periodically plug it in and run the backup. I hadn't touched it in at least 6 months. An impulse, sharp and sudden, made me grab it and plug it into my laptop. The drive whirred to life. The file directory was exactly as I remembered. Invoices, client contacts, design sketches, and then a folder I had never seen before, car stuff. My heart gave a painful lurch. With a shaking hand, I clicked it open. The contents were a punch to the gut. There were photos of my car, taken from every angle. A screenshot of the Kelly Blue Book trade-in value. And an email chain between my father and a man named Bill, a guy from his bowling league. The first email was dated 3 months ago. My blood turned to ice as I read the words my father had written. From Richard Evans to Bill R. Subject: Accord. Hey Bill, following up on our chat at the alley the other night. Still interested in the Honda for your kid? He's a good kid, deserves a good car. I'm thinking we can make a deal soon. My boy's been working a lot, putting miles on it, so the sooner the better before he runs it into the ground. Before he runs it into the ground. The casual, dismissive cruelty of that line stole my breath. He was talking about me, his son, like I was an inconvenience, an obstacle to his profit. The response from Bill confirmed the timeline. From Bill R. to Richard Evans. Subject: Accord. Yeah, Rich, definitely still interested. My son's birthday is in October. It would be a perfect surprise. Let me know when you're ready to pull the trigger. October. My birthday. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision born from financial panic. This was a long con. A premeditated, calculated plot to sell my car, using my birthday as the deadline. The fight about Jason's college fund wasn't the reason. It was just the convenient excuse he needed to justify it to my mother and the rest of the family. A wave of hot, acrid nausea rose in my throat. I leaned back in my chair, the betrayal so absolute it felt like a physical blow. He hadn't just sold my car. He had conspired to do it, bad-mouthing me to his bowling buddy in the process. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The grief was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a cold, surgical anger. I unplugged the hard drive and shoved it deep into the main compartment of my laptop bag. My eyes scanned the desk. Next to the keyboard lay a small, black leather-bound notebook. My dad's password book. He was paranoid about saving passwords on a computer, so for years I had been the one to meticulously write down every username and password for every account he had. His email, his Amazon account, his online banking, and most importantly, the login for the high-end artisan marketplace where he sold 90% of his custom furniture. Without a second thought, I picked up the notebook and slid it into the back pocket of my jeans. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about severing the last tie. I was his IT department. The department was now closed. I zipped up the second duffel bag, slung it over my shoulder, and grabbed my laptop bag. I was ready. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, my father was standing there, blocking the path to the front door as if he could physically stop what was happening. He was a bull of a man, and he was using his size to try and intimidate me one last time. So this is it? He sneered, his face mottled with rage. You're throwing a childish tantrum and walking out on the family that raised you? You told me to pack my bags, I said, my voice eerily calm. You said I was dead to you. I'm just respecting your wishes. Don't you get smart with me? He growled, stepping so close I could smell the beer on his breath. He jabbed a thick finger hard into my chest. You owe us. You are selfish and you will fail out there. You'll be back in a week, begging us to take you back. I looked down at his finger pressing into my sternum, then back up into his furious eyes. The ice around my heart didn't just crack. It shattered into a million pieces, releasing a rage so pure and cold it felt like a superpower. Get your hand off me, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a razor. I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes, then a surge of fury. He was about to push me again. I braced myself, but something in my expression, some new and final emptiness, must have stopped him. He wasn't looking at his timid, accommodating son anymore. He was looking at a stranger. He slowly, reluctantly, lowered his hand. Fine, he spat, his face contorted in a mask of disgust. Go on, get out. But don't you ever come crawling back to this door. It's closed to you. You are no longer my son. I adjusted the heavy bags on my shoulders and walked around him. I didn't look at my mother, who was now weeping openly, her face buried in her hands. I didn't say goodbye. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cool night air. I pulled the door shut behind me, not slamming it, but closing it with a quiet, deliberate click. That click echoed in the silent street. It was the sound of a lock turning, the sound of a cage opening, the sound of a life ending, and another one beginning. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time it was mine. Ethan's apartment on the third floor of a creaky old building was my haven. It was the organized chaos of a single guy in his late 20s. A stack of video games on the floor, a guitar leaning against the wall, and the faint, comforting smell of day-old pizza. He took one look at my face, the heavy bags slung over my shoulders, and simply opened the door wider. "Couch is yours for as long as you need it," he said, taking one of the duffel bags from me. "Beers in the fridge. Pizza's on the way." He didn't pepper me with questions or offer platitudes. He just gave me space. For the first hour, I sat on his worn leather couch, the springs groaning under my weight, and just existed. The adrenaline from the confrontation had drained away, leaving a vast, empty space where my family used to be. The sheer totality of it was overwhelming. In the span of a few hours, I had lost my car, my home, and my parents. The grief was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Ethan put a beer in my hand and sank into the armchair opposite me, flipping through TV channels with the volume low. He was giving me the gift of a normal, quiet evening, a temporary ceasefire in the war that had just been declared on my life. "You know," he said, his eyes on the screen, "you can just sit there and stare at the wall all night. That's fine. Or you can talk. Or you can start throwing my decorative pillows. Whatever you gotta do." I managed a weak, watery smile. "I think I just need to do something," I said, my voice hoarse. "I feel like if I stop moving, I'm gonna fall apart." "All right?" He nodded, understanding immediately. Action mode. "What's the mission?" I gestured to my laptop bag. "The mission," I said, feeling a flicker of my earlier, colder resolve, "is to decommission a network." Setting up my laptop on his cluttered coffee table, I went to work. This wasn't about lashing out. This was about self-preservation. It was a systematic, surgical removal of every digital tentacle my family had wrapped around my life and finances. It was a strange, disembodying process. My fingers, acting on years of muscle memory, typed commands and navigated complex user interfaces, while my heart felt like a raw, open wound. First, I logged into the joint bank account. The deposit for $5,500, the price he got for my Honda, was sitting there, a glaring monument to his betrayal. My name was still on the account, a convenience he'd insisted on years ago so I could easily transfer them money. I went through the scheduled payments one by one. The mortgage, the electricity bill, the water bill, the premium cable and internet package he considered a basic human right. The family cell phone plan, which was under my name for a better rate. I didn't cancel the services. I simply and methodically deleted the automatic payment instructions for each one. From now on, they would have to log in and pay each bill manually, a task I knew my father was technologically incapable of performing. With every click, a ghost of a memory appeared. I remembered setting up the mortgage autopay after my dad forgot to mail the check 2 months in a row, nearly tanking their credit score. The late-night call from my mom, her voice trembling with panic. I remembered upgrading the internet package to the highest tier, not for me, but so Jason's online gaming wouldn't lag, and then spending an hour on the phone with customer service to apply my own employee discount to their account. Each click felt like I was deleting a piece of my own history, erasing 1,000 tiny acts of service that had been demanded, accepted, and immediately forgotten. Next, I tackled the business. I plugged in the external hard drive I'd taken. All his client data, invoices, and design sketches were there. I didn't delete a single file. That would be sabotage. This was about control. I spent 30 minutes uploading the entire contents of the drive to a secure, encrypted cloud server. A digital vault only I had the key to. Then I initiated a low-level format of the physical drive, wiping it completely clean. Then I pulled out the little black password book. His entire digital life was scrawled in those pages in his messy handwriting. I logged into his account on the Artisan Furniture Marketplace. I navigated to the security settings. I changed the password to a long, complex string of random characters that I didn't even bother to write down. Then, I changed the recovery email from his personal address to a new, anonymous Proton Mail account I had created minutes earlier. Finally, the masterstroke. I went to the payment settings. The account was set to deposit his earnings into their joint checking account. I changed it, redirecting all future payouts to a new, empty savings account that I opened in my own name. The money would be safe there. It was an escrow, a holding pattern. He couldn't get his money until he talked to me. I was so engrossed. I didn't realize I had started shaking until Ethan's hand landed on my shoulder. "Easy, man," he said softly. I looked up, and he gestured to my hands, which were clenched into white-knuckled fists on the keyboard. "Breathe." I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. I let it out in a long, shuddering sigh. The detached, surgical focus shattered, and the grief came rushing back in, a tidal wave of pain. "What am I doing, Ethan?" I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "This is my family." "No," he said, his voice firm, pulling up a dining chair to sit next to me. "They stopped being just your family when they decided you were a tool, a means to an end. I've watched it for years, man. I've watched them suck you dry. I was there when you had to sell your comic book collection to pay for Jason's band trip. I was there when you missed my sister's wedding because your dad decided last minute he needed you to help him deliver a table. What you're doing right now isn't cruel. It's drawing a boundary. It's the loudest no you've ever said." His words, his unwavering belief in me, were the only thing holding me together. He was right. This wasn't an attack. It was a defense, a declaration of independence. The tears I'd been holding back since I read that first text finally came. They weren't loud or dramatic. They just streamed down my face, hot and silent. The tears of a son who finally understood that he had been orphaned not by death, but by choice, his parents' choice. I grieved for the father I wished I had, the mother I deserved, and the brother I never really knew. Ethan just sat there, a silent, solid presence, letting the storm pass. He didn't offer empty reassurances. He just bore witness to my pain, and in doing so, he shared the burden of it. When the tears finally subsided, I felt scoured clean, raw but resolute. I wiped my face on my sleeve. "Thank you," I mumbled, feeling both embarrassed and profoundly grateful. "Anytime," he said simply. "Now, what's next?" I pulled the laptop towards me again. The last phase. I wasn't just building a firewall. I was building my case. I spent the next hour creating a master spreadsheet, a ledger of my life. I combed through years of my own bank statements, finding every transfer to my parents' account, every bill I had paid directly, every Venmo to Jason for gas money or a new textbook. I attached screenshots and digital receipts. Then, I created another tab, uncompensated labor. I logged the website rebuild, estimating the freelance hours at a conservative rate. I logged the countless hours of IT support, the emergency repairs, the errands. The final number was sickening. In the last 5 years alone, my direct and indirect financial contributions, combined with the market value of my skilled labor, exceeded $50,000. And that didn't even include the car. I stared at the number on the screen. It wasn't a feeling anymore. It was a fact backed by data. I wasn't the selfish son. I was the silent, unacknowledged investor who had kept their entire enterprise afloat. And they had just tried to execute the most hostile takeover imaginable. I saved the spreadsheet, encrypted it, and uploaded it to the same secure server as the business files. My case was built. The firewall was active. All I had to do now was wait for the inevitable impact. The first 72 hours were defined by a profound and unsettling silence. My phone, usually a constant source of summons from my family, remained dark and quiet. No texts from my mom asking why the printer wasn't working. No calls from my dad demanding I pick up a specific type of sandpaper from the hardware store across town. It was the eerie calm of deep space, and I felt untethered, floating in a new and unfamiliar reality. I tried to establish a routine. I went to work during the day, burying myself in the clean, logical world of code and network architecture. It was a relief to solve problems that had clear, definable solutions. At night, Ethan and I would order takeout, watch bad action movies, and talk about anything other than my family. He was a master at creating a sense of normalcy in the midst of chaos. But beneath the surface, I was a coiled spring of anticipation. I knew the silence couldn't last. Their world was running on a system whose administrator had just resigned. The first tremor hit on Friday afternoon. A text from my cousin, Megan. She's my Aunt Patricia's daughter, and unlike the rest of the family, she'd always treated me like a person, not a utility. Megan. Hey, what on earth is going on? Your dad just called my mom in a full-blown panic. He's saying he can't get into his online marketplace account and he's blaming you. Is everything okay? I could see the narrative taking shape. I was no longer just the ungrateful son. I was the vindictive saboteur. Me, hey Meg. It's a long story. Dad and I had a major falling out. I moved out on Tuesday. The reply was instant. Megan. What? Moved out? Marcus, why didn't you call me? Are you safe? Where are you? Me, I'm okay. Staying with Ethan for now. As for the account, I have no idea. He probably just forgot his password again. He should try using the forgot password link. It was a perfectly crafted, technically true statement. I hadn't changed his password. I had changed it to something unknowable. And the reset link was a dead end, a digital road leading off a cliff. I felt a small, dark pang of satisfaction. The next day, Saturday, the tremors became a full-blown earthquake. My Aunt Patricia called, her voice strained with stress. Marcus, thank heavens you answered, she said, skipping any pleasantries. Your father is about to have an aneurysm. He has a customer in California who bought that big reclaimed oak dining table, the one for over $3,000. The customer is emailing every hour, demanding a tracking number, and your father can't log in to print the shipping label or even see the guy's address. He's swearing you hacked him to destroy his business. Aunt Trish, I said, keeping my voice as calm and neutral as I could. I haven't touched any of his accounts since I left. He made it very clear he wanted me out of his life. I'm just respecting his wishes. But this is his livelihood, Marcus. You know he's useless with this computer stuff. He needs your help. He didn't seem to think he needed my help when he sold my car on my birthday, I said quietly. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. He what? Ask him, I said. Ask him what he did. I can't be his free on-call IT department anymore, Aunt Trish. It's not right. I could hear my dad's muffled shouting in the background of her call. A furious, impotent roar. I hung up, my hand trembling slightly. The first domino had fallen. By Sunday, the entire chain was collapsing. My phone began to light up with calls from my father, each one angrier and more desperate than the last. I let them all go to voicemail. They became a sort of audio diary of his descent into technological hell. Voicemail 1. Marcus, I know you're getting these messages. Pick up the damn phone. The internet is down. The light on the box is just blinking. Fix it. Now. Voicemail 2. The television isn't working. It's showing some error message your mother doesn't understand. What did you do to it? She's missing her favorite show, and she's having a complete meltdown. Voicemail 3. Jason just called me from the library. The Wi-Fi password isn't working anymore. He has a final paper due for his summer class. Are you actively trying to ruin your brother's chances at a good education? This selfish tantrum of yours is affecting his entire future. The final voicemail, left late Sunday night, was a masterpiece of misplaced confidence. Voicemail 4. Fine. You want to play it this way? Fine. I don't need you. I'll just call the cable company myself in the morning. They'll fix it. You think you're so indispensable. You're nothing. I almost laughed out loud. I knew for a fact that the cable and internet account was under my name. I'd set it up years ago to get a new customer promotion and had never bothered to change it. He wasn't the account holder. He wasn't even listed as an authorized user. As far as the cable company was concerned, he was just some random guy living in my house. They wouldn't tell him a thing. The ultimate confirmation of their total system failure arrived on Monday night. I was at Ethan's trying to focus on a movie when my phone buzzed. It was a video message from Mr. Henderson, my retired 65-year-old next-door neighbor. Mr. Henderson was a man of few words but many observations. His front porch his command center for monitoring the neighborhood's daily dramas. The message had no text, just the video file. My heart hammered as I pressed play. The video was shaky, obviously filmed through the blinds of his living room window. It showed my father, Richard Evans, standing on the brightly lit porch of the Miller's house across the street. He was pleading, his hands gesturing wildly. The audio was muffled by the glass, but a few words cut through with chilling clarity. Just until Friday, a big misunderstanding, the power bill. They're going to shut it off. My father, my proud, tyrannical, I don't need anyone. Father was going door to door, like a traveling salesman of sob stories, begging his neighbors for cash to pay the electric bill. A bill that had gone unpaid because the automatic payment I had set up was canceled, and he couldn't figure out how to navigate the utility company's website to pay it himself. A wave of grim, icy validation washed over me. It wasn't happiness. It was the stark, undeniable confirmation of a truth I had always known but had never been able to prove. Without me, he was helpless. Without my invisible, unacknowledged labor, his entire world ground to a halt. His pride, the currency he had used to bully and control us for decades, was worthless. He had been reduced to a beggar, not by my actions, but by the absence of them. I saved the video. It was the final exhibit in my case. The closing argument. The house of cards he had built on my back was collapsing in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. The summons came on Tuesday, exactly 1 week after my life had been turned upside down. The caller was my grandmother, Eleanor Evans. At 78, she was the family's true center of gravity. My grandfather had built a successful construction business from the ground up, and when he passed, he left my grandmother not just with a significant inheritance, but with the full weight of his authority. She was sharp, shrewd, and she did not suffer fools, especially not in her own bloodline. "Marcus," she said, her voice on the phone as crisp and clear as a winter morning. There was no preamble. "I've been hearing some very disturbing stories this past week. Your Aunt Patricia sounds like she's on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and your father, when I finally got him on the phone, was practically incoherent. There will be a meeting at my house tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. You will be there." It was a royal decree, not an invitation. "Grandma, with all due respect, I don't think that's a good idea," I started, a knot tightening in my stomach. "Dad and I are not in a good place." "I am not interested in what place you are in." She cut me off, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I am interested in the truth. I have already informed your parents and your brother. They will be present. You will be too. And Marcus," she added, her voice dropping slightly, "bring whatever you think I need to see to understand the full picture." The line went dead. The stage was set. A reckoning was coming. For the next 24 hours, I barely ate or slept. I was a lawyer preparing for the most important case of my life. I took the spreadsheet I had created and transformed it into a full-blown presentation, complete with embedded documents, screenshots, and timelines. I made sure every claim was backed by irrefutable, time-stamped proof. I even embedded the video Mr. Henderson had sent me. I was terrified, but beneath the fear was a bedrock of certainty. I wasn't going into that meeting with opinions or feelings. I was going in with facts. I arrived at my grandmother's stately brick house at 6:55 p.m. The living room, usually a warm and inviting space, felt like a courtroom. My grandmother sat in her high-backed wing chair, the judge's throne. On the long sofa opposite her sat my parents. My father's face was a mask of thunderous resentment. My mother looked small and fragile, her eyes fixed on her own tightly clasped hands. Jason was slumped in a separate armchair, the accused in the dock, radiating teenage misery. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Greg sat on a love seat to the side, their faces grim. They were the jury. The silence was so thick I could taste it. I walked in, gave a brief nod to my grandmother, and took the empty armchair she had reserved for me, setting my laptop on the heavy oak coffee table between us. "Good," my grandmother said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "We are all here, Richard, you have the floor. Explain to me what has happened to this family. My father cleared his throat and launched into the performance I knew was coming. He spoke of my shocking disrespect, my childish selfishness, my vindictive digital attack on his livelihood. He wove a tale of a patient, loving father pushed to the brink by an ungrateful son who valued a stupid car more than his own brother's future. All I did was ask for a little help with Jason's college fund, he concluded, his voice quivering with manufactured emotion. And in return, he sabotaged my business and turned his back on his own family. My grandmother listened to the entire performance without blinking, her expression as unreadable as stone. When he was finished, she turned her cool, intelligent eyes to me. Marcus, I took a deep, steadying breath. That's one version of the story, I said, my voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. Now I'd like to present another one. I opened my laptop and connected it to the large smart TV mounted over the fireplace. The screen flickered to life, displaying the title slide, The Evans Family Ledger. A 7-year audit of contributions and expenses. Grandma, you asked me to bring whatever you needed to see, I said, looking directly at her. I didn't bring accusations. I brought receipts. For the next 25 minutes, I was no longer Marcus, the son. I was Marcus, the forensic accountant. I walked them through the data, my voice calm and professional. I showed them the slide detailing the nearly $10,000 in utility bills I had paid. The slide with the invoices for the new water heater, the drywall repair, the emergency plumbing service. The slide listing every loan I had given my father that was never repaid, complete with dates and scanned images of the checks. With each click of the presentation remote, the temperature in the room dropped. My mother's quiet sniffling turned into audible sobs. Aunt Patricia stared at my father, her mouth slightly agape in horror. Uncle Greg's face was turning a dangerous shade of purple, his gaze fixed on my father with an expression of pure contempt. Then I brought up the emails about the sale of my car. My father jumped to his feet. That's out of context. We were just talking. Were you just talking when you told him you needed to sell it before I ran it into the ground? I countered, advancing to the next slide, which had that specific sentence highlighted in red. My father sputtered and sat back down, deflated. For the finale, I played the video. The shaky footage of my father on the Miller's porch filled the 60-inch screen. His desperate, pleading voice, begging for money to pay the power bill, echoed through the dead-silent living room. My father's face went as white as a sheet. Jason, mortified, buried his face in his hands. I paused the video on a close-up of my father's humiliated expression. And that, I said softly, is what this family's finances look like without my selfish contributions. I closed my laptop. The case was rested. The silence that descended was heavier, more profound than before. It was the silence of judgment. It was my grandmother who finally spoke, her voice deceptively soft. Richard, she said, looking at my father with an expression of deep, weary disappointment. You always did have a remarkable ability to believe your own lies. Eleanor, I was under pressure, he began, his voice weak. Pressure? She cut him off, her voice suddenly turning to ice. Let's talk about pressure. And let's talk about your father. My husband. She stood up and walked with a slow, deliberate grace to a heavy mahogany chest in the corner. She unlocked it with a small, ornate key and withdrew a long, yellowed envelope sealed with wax. Your father was a master craftsman, she said, her gaze sweeping over all of us before landing back on my father. He believed that a man's worth was in the integrity of his work. He saw that integrity in Marcus. He saw the patience, the focus, the attention to detail. He saw a builder. In you, Richard, he saw a salesman. She held up the envelope. The wax seal was unbroken. Before he died, he wrote this letter. It's an addendum to his will, personal directive. In it, he bequeaths his workshop, all of his professional-grade tools, and a seed fund of $25,000 from his personal savings to start a business. Not to you. To his grandson, Marcus. The air was sucked out of the room. I felt my own breath catch in my chest. I couldn't process what I was hearing. My grandmother's eyes, cold and sharp as diamonds, pinned my father to the sofa. He gave this to me and told me to give it to Marcus when the time was right, when he was mature enough to handle it. After the funeral, I tried to discuss your father's wishes with you. I told you he wanted to set Marcus up. And you, Richard, you told me Marcus wasn't interested. You said he didn't have the head for business, that he'd just waste the money. You lied to me. You stole your son's inheritance before he ever knew he had one. She walked over to me, her expression softening as she looked into my eyes. She placed the heavy, time-worn envelope into my trembling hands. "The time," she said, her voice full of a quiet, powerful conviction, "is now." My father made a strange, strangled sound, a noise caught somewhere between a gasp and a sob. He stared at the envelope in my hands, then at his mother's unyielding face, and in that moment, the tyrant collapsed. All that was left was a hollowed-out man, stripped bare of all his lies, exposed and broken in the harsh, unforgiving light of the truth. The moments after my grandmother's revelation were a blur of shattered composure and raw, unfiltered emotion. The carefully constructed facade of our family didn't just crack. It imploded, sending shrapnel of truth and betrayal into every corner of the room. Uncle Greg was a volcano erupting. He shot to his feet, his face a mask of pure fury. "You son of a bitch!" he roared, pointing a trembling finger at my father. "All these years, you've been playing the put-upon patriarch, complaining about how much you do for everyone. All along, you were a parasite. You leached off your own kid. And stealing his inheritance? From your own dead father? That's not just shameful, Richard. That's evil." He grabbed Aunt Patricia's hand. "Come on, Pat. I can't breathe the same air as him." Aunt Patricia, her face a mess of tears and disbelief, allowed herself to be pulled to her feet and led out of the house without a single backward glance at her brother. The most profound reaction, however, came from Jason. He had been a statue of misery for the entire meeting, but now he slowly, deliberately, rose from his chair. He didn't look at me or my grandmother. He looked directly at our father, who was now staring at the floor, a broken man. "The college fund," Jason said, his voice surprisingly clear and steady, though quiet. "That whole story, the tuition bill being due, was any of it true?" My father didn't answer. He just gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. That was all Jason needed. "I knew it," Jason whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. He then turned and, for the first time, looked directly at me. There was no animosity in his eyes, only a deep, dawning horror and a flicker of something that looked like respect. "I'm sorry, Marcus," he said, the words feeling genuine and heavy. "For all of it. For being so stupid." He didn't wait for me to reply. He just turned and walked out the front door, leaving a gaping hole where the golden child used to be. My mother finally broke completely. The silent, weeping martyr was gone, replaced by a woman convulsing with loud, gut-wrenching sobs. It was the sound of a 30-year illusion being ripped away, and it was terrifying to witness. My grandmother gently guided me into her kitchen, away from the wreckage. She put a kettle on the stove and moved with a calm, purposeful efficiency that was an anchor in the emotional storm. "He will have to find his own way out of this," she said, her back to me as she prepared 2 mugs. "Pride was the only thing holding him up, and that's gone now." She turned, her face a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "We will call my lawyer, Mr. Davison, in the morning. He handled your grandfather's estate. He will have all the paperwork. We will get the funds and the deed to the workshop transferred to you immediately. This will be clean and official." The word lawyer made it all real. The inheritance. It was a concept from movies and books, not something that happened in my life. I had walked into that house expecting, at best, a grudging apology. I was walking out with a legacy. The week that followed was a whirlwind of change. The family dynamic didn't just shift. It was completely redrawn. My father was an island, isolated by his own deceit. My mother, shocked into action, delivered the ultimatum that would define the rest of their lives. He would enter intensive therapy and they would attend marriage counseling, or she would file for divorce. The threat, once unthinkable, was now the only thing on the table. Faced with losing everything, he agreed. 2 days after the meeting, my doorbell at Ethan's apartment rang. It was Jason. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He awkwardly held out a 6-pack of my favorite beer as a peace offering. We sat on the balcony for hours, and he told me everything. He confessed he never wanted to go to the expensive university, that he only went along with it because he was terrified of disappointing Dad. His real passion was graphic design. He showed me a portfolio on his tablet, and it was genuinely good. For the first time, I wasn't talking to my coddled younger brother. I was talking to a young man, another victim of our father's manipulations. We didn't solve everything that night, but we laid the first stone of a new foundation, one built on honesty instead of resentment. My new support system was a revelation. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Greg insisted on taking me out to dinner, where they apologized over and over for not seeing the truth sooner. My cousin Megan became my personal real estate scout, sending me apartment listings and offering to be a reference. And then there was Sarah, a programmer at my company. She was whip-smart, funny, and had a quiet kindness that I'd always admired from afar. She had noticed my stress at work and had taken to leaving a cup of good coffee on my desk in the mornings with a simple post-it note that said, "You got this." Buoyed by a surge of uncharacteristic confidence, I asked her out. On our first date, over tacos and beer, the entire insane story of the past few weeks came pouring out of me. I expected her to be overwhelmed, maybe even scared off by the sheer tonnage of my family baggage. Instead, she just listened intently, her eyes full of a deep, knowing empathy. "My mother was a compulsive gambler," she said softly after I had finished, a story I'd never heard her tell. "I spent most of my 20s paying off her debts, making excuses for her. I finally had to cut her off financially to save myself. It was the hardest, most necessary thing I've ever done." She reached across the table and her fingers brushed against mine. "It takes an incredible amount of strength to choose yourself, Marcus. Don't ever let anyone make you feel guilty for it." Her words, her shared vulnerability, felt like a release. I wasn't damaged goods. I was a survivor. And for the first time, I felt like I was sitting across from someone who truly saw me. A few weeks later, everything was official. With the help of Mr. Davison, the inheritance was settled. I had a significant sum in my bank account and the deed to a dusty but spacious workshop near the old industrial park. The first thing I did was buy a car. A safe, reliable, slightly used Subaru Outback. I paid in cash. The title was in my name and my name alone. The second thing I did was sign a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment with big windows and a small balcony. As my pen flowed across the signature line, I felt a profound sense of peace. This was mine. No one could take it away. My father tried to call a few times. I let the calls go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk to him. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind only a hollow sadness for the man he could have been. He had a long, steep road to climb, and for the first time in his life, he was going to have to climb it alone. My tenure as his safety net was over. Permanently. 6 months later, I was a different person living a different life. Autumn had bled into a cold, crisp winter, and the changes in my life were just as stark. The small, empty apartment I had rented was now a home, filled with mismatched but comfortable furniture, thriving plants, and the quiet hum of a life built on my own terms. The business, which I named Legacy IT Solutions, in a nod to my grandfather, was flourishing. I didn't use his workshop for woodworking. The world had enough tables and chairs. Instead, I honored his spirit of craftsmanship by building something new. I transformed the dusty space into a state-of-the-art tech lab and launched a consulting firm for small and local businesses. These were the people often ignored by the big IT corporations, the florists, the plumbers, the local diners. I offered them honest, reliable tech support. My motto was simple: we fix things. Sarah was my partner in every sense of the word. She designed my logo and website, and her sharp business sense was the perfect complement to my technical skills. Our relationship was easy and real, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared experience. She never tried to fix my family issues. She just supported my decisions. My bond with Jason was the most unexpected gift. He was thriving in community college, his graphic design work winning him accolades from his professors. He'd come over to my apartment on Sundays. We'd watch football, argue about movies, and he'd show me his latest projects. We were slowly, carefully, getting to know each other as men, not as the roles our father had assigned us. I kept a careful distance from my parents, but I received updates from Aunt Patricia. My father was still in therapy. He was quieter, she said, humbled. He had started taking on smaller, less profitable jobs and was, for the first time, managing his own books. His business was struggling, but he was keeping it afloat. His promotion to a self-sufficient adult was a difficult one. The threat of divorce still loomed, but my mother was holding firm, insisting he do the work. Their future was uncertain, a story still being written. One Saturday afternoon in late winter, I was at my workshop calibrating a new server when my phone rang. The screen displayed a name I hadn't seen in months. Dad. My first instinct was to hit decline, a conditioned response to a threat. But as my thumb hovered over the screen, I paused. The fear, the anger, the knot of obligation in my stomach. It was gone. All I felt was a quiet curiosity. I was no longer the scared son. I was the CEO of my own life. I swiped to answer. Hello. A hesitant voice, smaller and thinner than I remembered it, came through the speaker. Marcus. Hi, Dad. He stumbled over his words. I know I don't have any right to call, but your mother, she told me about your business. Legacy IT. That's a good name. Thanks, I said, leaning against a workbench. An awkward silence stretched between us, thick with everything unsaid. Then he took a ragged breath. I'm sorry, he said, the words sounding rusty and foreign on his tongue. For the car, for the letter, for all of it. There's no excuse. I was wrong. It wasn't a perfect, Hollywood-style apology. It wouldn't magically heal decades of wounds. But it was real. It was the first honest thing he had said to me in years. I appreciate you saying that, Dad, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. We talked for a few more minutes about the weather, about his work. It was stilted, awkward, like two strangers learning a new language. But there were no demands, no manipulations, no veiled insults. When we hung up, I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I just felt calm. I looked around the workshop my grandfather had intended for me, filled with the business I had built. I realized in that moment that true freedom wasn't about winning a fight or cutting someone out of your life completely. It was about reaching a place where their actions no longer had power over you. It was about answering the phone not because you had to, but because you could, knowing you were strong enough to hang up at any time. My family had spent a lifetime trying to teach me that my worth was conditional on my usefulness to them. I finally understood that my worth was my own. It wasn't theirs to give, and it was no longer theirs to take away. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's a long and complicated journey to learn your own value, especially when the people closest to you are the ones who make you doubt it. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up for yourself against the people you were supposed to trust the most? Share your story in the comments below. I read them all. And if this story meant something to you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing so you don't miss what's next.